Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some more updates on the roster news. We've got some more roster cuts, PTO cuts, and waiver news, as well as we got some injury updates, and what can we see over the next couple of days, leading up to the finalizing of the rosters in the start of the season. With all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Nintendo Hockey Channel. Before I start, don't forget to like this video and don't forget to subscribe. We're close to 200 subscribers. You guys have been so supportive. I would never be able to do this channel without you guys, so once again, don't forget to subscribe. But as we start this video, I'm going to start by discussing a couple of signings that have happened over the past couple of days. There have been a handful of signings, including a couple of entry-level contracts. First, the Boston Bruins have signed Frederick Brunette, who is a left-shot defenseman taken in the 5th round of the 2022 draft. He signs a 3-year ELC with $860,000, and the deal will begin at the start of this year. Now, Brunette played in the QMJHL last year, putting up 73 points in 68 QMJHL games. He looks like a really good defenseman over in the QMJHL. He's going to probably go back over there for this upcoming season, but he looks like a really decent prospect. I think the Bruins have been really happy with what they've seen from him. I think in time, Brunette could definitely be a good, solid third pair left shot defenseman. I think that's a really good possibility. For the time being, I think Brunette goes back to QMJHL for the next year or two, probably continues to develop there. But I think in 2 to 3 years' time, I think Brunette could definitely be a solid third pair defenseman for the Bruins. So it's a solid signing there. Not a big one, but as a 5th round pick, it's good to see him sign a year after his draft season. And I think he's going to be a really good player in the not distant future. So a solid sign there for the Bruins to get Brunette signed to an ELC. Then the Edmonton Oilers signed Brady Stonehouse, who invited to training camp after he had a good showing at rookie camp. The right winger signs a 3-year ELC with a $845,000 deal after going undrafted in the NHL. So that's a really good deal. The right winger looks like a really good player. Put up 57 points in 67 OHL games last year, so he looks like a really good player, possibly a future top 6 forward. I think Stonehouse looks like a really good player. He showed really well at training camp, so I think Stonehouse could definitely be a really good player in time for the Oilers, maybe like a good solid bomb 6 forward. So he goes to training camp on an invite. He shows he's really good. He earns himself a 3-year ELC. In time, I think he could be a decent bomb 6 forward, but for the time being, he'll probably go back to the OHL for the next year or two. So solid entry-level contract, in my opinion, for the Oilers. Stonehouse has definitely looked like he's done really, really well over the past little while, and I think he's going to be a fantastic Oiler in the not-too-distant future. And then with the San Jose Sharks, they signed 2022 5th-round pick, left-shot defenseman Jake Furlong to a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $871,000. Now, that's not a bad deal, in my opinion. Furlong, like Brunette, was a 5th-round pick a year ago, a left-shot defenseman. Looks he could be eventually a solid third-pair defenseman. He put up 50 points in 67 QMJHL games last year, so he looked like he could be a very good defenseman. In my eyes, I think, just like Brunette, probably a year or two in the juniors, then maybe a year or two away before he's ready to compete for an NHL roster spot. But in 2 to 3 years' time, I could see Furlong, like Brunette in Boston, at least challenge for a roster spot. So a solid deal in there for the San Jose Sharks, and I think he's going to be a fantastic player in a couple of years' time for the San Jose Sharks. And then you have Sage Weinstein, who was undrafted player, left-shot defenseman, signs a 3-year ELC with the Colorado Avalanche with an AAV of $800,000, and he'll be at the start of this year. Weinstein, like Stonehouse, most likely went to camp with the Avalanche. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure he went to camp with the Avalanche. Got a solid look there. Looked like he could be a future player, and the Avalanche signed him. The Avs don't have a deep prospect pool, so I think there's a chance that in a couple of years' time, Weinstein could definitely challenge for like a third-pair role in the Avalanche. Put up 18 points in 54 games last year, so he looks like he could be a decent defenseman, but maybe not an overly flashy one. So I think there's a chance for Weinstein to have like a third-pair role on the Avalanche in a year or two's time. But for the time being, he'll probably go back to the OHL and continue to do really well there. But definitely a really good ELC there from the Avalanche and from the Oilers, from the Sharks and from the Bruins as those 4 players, 2 undrafted and 2 fifth-round picks, get ELCs over the past couple of days. And lastly, here I want to go over to Jamie Drysdale. Drysdale, who was one of the last 3 RFAs, has now indeed gotten signed. Drysdale signs a 3-year deal with the AV of $2.3 million. Now, I do really like this deal for the Ducks. Once again, just like Zegras, I saw he would have gotten a little bit more, but Drysdale's a little bit more difficult than Zegras because Drysdale missed basically the entire season last year due to injuries. He only played like a handful of games, so he wasn't overly productive last year, but he's shown in the past he can be a solid top 4 defenseman. I have no doubt in my mind that Drysdale will be able to live up to this contract as long as he's able to stay healthy. In my opinion, Drysdale, who's a solid top 4 right shot defenseman, should be able to live up to a $2.3 million contract. I thought he would have gone at least 3, maybe 3.5 mil. So I am quite surprised he signed for under $3 million. But still, I think Drysdale's a solid player, and I think he's going to definitely work out with Anaheim. So good to see he got there. He's been into training camp for the past couple of days, so they're getting some practice under him, and now it looks like him and Zegras are both going to be ready for the start of the NHL season. So good to see that the Ducks were able to sign him. It was taking a while, so I was worried that they weren't going to be able to sign him. But Drysdale, 2.3 mil is a steal of a deal in my opinion for the Ducks, and I think he should definitely be able to live up to that. So a solid deal in my opinion, and it's a 3-year deal, so it's another bridge deal. So both Zegras and Drysdale are going to be up at the same time for their next contract. So solid deal in my opinion. 2.3 mil for a top 4 right shot defenseman. As long as Drysdale can stay healthy, this should be a fantastic deal in my opinion. So good to see a Drysdale signed. We now only have 2 RFAs left in Pinto and Bernie. There's been some talk that Bernie could go overseas, and the Jackets could keep his signing rights beyond this year, so Bernie may not get an NHL contract, but we know that Pinto's still being worked on, and it sounds like they're still trying to come to a deal before the season starts in a couple of days. So going to be interesting to see, but there's the update for Jamie Drysdale signing his new deal, as well as a couple of updates with a couple of ELCs from around the NHL. Going over to a couple of roster updates. Now, as usual, like we talked about on Thursday, like we talked about on Tuesday, there have been a couple of roster cuts from the NHL. Most of these ones are pretty significant ones. The lower end players who were cut in bunches a couple of days ago are now all gone. These are some of the more prominent names that are being cut now from the NHL. Some are being placed on waivers. We'll get to waivers in a second. But for the ones that did not need waivers, the Anaheim Ducks cut Nathan Warren, sending him to the QMJHL. Not surprised there. Warren could definitely use another year in juniors, so that's not too much of a surprise. The Boston Bruins sent Brandon Bussi to the AHL. Once again, not too much of a surprise. The Bruins have Swayman and Allmark, so at this point, Bussi's their 3rd stringer. I think eventually he could be an NHL goalie, but for the time being, I don't think that's too much of a surprise. The Calgary Flames cut Connor Zary, Jeremy Poirier, and Dustin Wolf. A lot of people thought Wolf could definitely make the roster, but with still having Markstrom and Vladar on the roster and having Wolf be a waivers exempt, it makes sense to move him down. Poirier, Zary were 2 young players who I could have seen made the lineup. I didn't even predict Zary to make my opening night roster for the Calgary Flames, but it sounds like they're going to both go down to the minors for the start of the season, so that could be a decent start for those 3 players, but I did expect Zary possibly and Wolf to possibly make the NHL roster this year. The Carolina Hurricanes, as we've talked about before, don't have an AHL team. Their AHL club has decided to go their own way, so they don't have an AHL club right now. So they're in a bit of a tight spot right now. So they've moved some of their prospects to the ECHL. They've placed Noel Gunlier, Justin Robidas, Antoine Honka, and Ronan Seeley into their ECHL affiliate. They've also moved Alexi Hemosalami back to Liga, and then they have loaned Jamison Reese over to the Blues AHL affiliate. So not overly shocked that they had to move a couple of players to ECHL. Not exactly sure how that'll hurt their development or if they'll help their development, but definitely just interesting thing with Carolina not having an AHL affiliate. But they've definitely moved some players down. Didn't expect most of those guys to make the NHL roster anyway, so I'm not really surprised those guys were sent down. The Colorado Avalanche sent Jason Paul into the AHL. Depth player, I think eventually could be a good solid bottom 6 forward, so not surprised he goes down. The Blue Jackets moved Jacob Malatesta, Hunter McCowan, Carson Kuhlmans, and Stanislav Svazil all to the AHL. Those are all some decent prospects. I didn't expect any of those guys to make the NHL roster out of the gate, so I'm not surprised that Malatesta, McCowan, Kuhlmans, and Svazil are being sent down to the AHL. For the Detroit Red Wings, they sent Marco Kasper, Amadeus Lombardi, Albert Johansson, Emil Virio, William Willander and Sebastian Cossa to the AHL. Not overly shocked there. The Wings have 3 good goalies right now, so I'm not surprised that Cossa went to the minors. The Red Wings also have a couple of good defensemen. Not any surprise in my opinion that Willander and Vero went to the minors. I thought that they had a pretty deep forward group, so it would have been pretty hard for Casper to make the NHL roster. So, once again, not surprised that any of those guys in Detroit went down. One of the surprises was that Spencer Knight was sent to the AHL by the Florida Panthers. That's a little bit of a surprise, given the fact that Knight has a really good status to make the NHL this year. But when the Panthers were going on their playoff run last year, Knight was in the NHLPA Players Assistant Program. And the Panthers also have Anthony Stolarz, who's a decent backup, who would have had to been placed on waivers, and they didn't really want to do that. So they're going to start Spencer Knight in the minors, which probably isn't the worst idea. He's waivers exempt right now, so they can move him to the minors. He can definitely get a few starts in the AHL, definitely build up his confidence to the AHL level, show that he's still really good, and then eventually, maybe a couple of weeks into the season, once he's doing well, he's showing that he could definitely be called back up to the NHL. I expect he would be, and then at that point, Stolarz will be sent down to the AHL. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it seems like to start the season at least, they're going to have a Bobrovsky-Stolarz tandem, with Knight starting in the AHL to sort of gain some confidence. Some Kings players that I was surprised about also were sent down. Alex Turcotte, Alex Lafreniere, and Brendan Clark. I expected Turcotte to probably be sent down to the minors, unless he's being the third-line center, which he can't be at that point in time with their depth on the forward group. I was expecting Turcotte to probably go back down to the minors. I thought Lafreniere stood a good chance to be a decent bottom 6 forward, but he's going to start in the AHL. I don't think it's too much of a surprise, nor do I think it's a bad thing. I did think Brendan Clark was going to make the NHL and be a solid top 4 defenseman right out of the gates. I am a little bit surprised he was sent down to the AHL this early, but I'll expect him to definitely be getting a call up early in the season and be able to be a solid defenseman for the Kings. The Minnesota Wild sent down defenseman Damon Hunt to the AHL. Not surprised there. The Wild have a decent defense, and Hunt I think could definitely use some AHL time. The Islanders sent down William Dufour, Ruslan Iskakov, Matthew Maggio, Travis Mitchell, and Kali Odelius. I'm not surprised at all that Maggio, Iskakov to some extent, Odelius or Mitchell were sent to the minors. I thought there was a chance Iskakov could get there. I also thought that William Dufour could definitely use some time in the top 9 of the Islanders, so I am a little bit surprised he's going to the AHL, but definitely I think all those players could definitely use some time in the AHL. The New York Rangers sent down Brennan Othmann. Othmann had a fantastic training camp, and I thought he had a good chance to be a top 9 forward. I even projected him to be a solid top 9 forward in my season preview for the Rangers, so I am a little bit surprised that he left for the New York Rangers. Then the Ottawa Senators, Tyler Boucher was sent to the AHL. Not surprised there. He could definitely use some development time. The Pittsburgh Penguins sent down Valeri Pushtainen as well as Sam Poulin to the AHL. Not surprised Pushtainen went to the AHL, but I thought Poulin stood a good chance to start the NHL roster, so I am a little bit surprised Poulin went to the AHL. Vegas sent down Brendan Brisson to the AHL. I am a little bit surprised there. Brisson had a fantastic training camp, so I thought he would have made the NHL roster, so I'm a little bit surprised, but he goes to the AHL. The Caps sent Lapierre and Vincent Iorio to the AHL. Decent players. I think they could definitely be good players in times, but I'm not overly shocked that they went to the minors. And then the Winnipeg Jets and Elias Salomonson to the SHL. So not overly shocked that all these guys were sent down. I definitely thought some of these guys would have been, but I'm not overly shocked that all of these guys were. So, going to be interesting to see. Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts. Which players do you think were the most surprising names to be sent down? In my opinion, Knight in Florida and Clark in LA. But there's definitely a couple of other surprises in my opinion. So, definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on who you think were the surprising players being sent down to the minors, who do not need waivers. Speaking of waivers, going to the waiver wire, the players who we mentioned in our quick update last video, who were placed on waivers on Thursday, and Calgary Flames players Nick DeSimone, Matthias Emilio Peterson, Martin Pospisil, Penguins players Andreas Johnsson, Jonas Kopanen, and Alex Nylander, and Kraken players Connor Carrick, Cameron Hughes, Cole Lind, Max McCormick, Gustav Olofsson, Andrew Portalowski, Mitch Reinke, Jimmy Schultz, Devin Shore, and Marian Studnick all cleared waivers. There were no claims on Friday. So all the players who were placed on waivers Thursday cleared Friday. I don't think there's any surprise there. I thought Lind and Shore in Seattle, as well as Janssen, and Nylander in Pittsburgh would have gotten at least a look. But all those guys cleared their sent to the minors, so I don't think that's overly surprising. But if you look at yesterday's roster updates, the waiver news, there have been a ton of players replaced on waivers yesterday. So if you look at the players replaced on waivers yesterday, you have Caleb Jones in Carolina. You have Alex Petrovic in Dallas. You have John Lethman, John Stevens, Tauro Heroes, Tim Gettinger, Brogan Rafferty, Wyatt Newpower, Jared McIsaac, and Austin Czarnik in Detroit. You have Marcus Bjork, Jake Christensen, Joshua Doon, Brendan Gaunce, Carson Mayer, and Billy Sweezy in Columbus. You have Denisenko, Lockwood, True, and Kierstead in Florida. You have Ken Appleby, Dennis Cholowski, Aran Durandu, Grant Hutton, Otto Koivula, Carson Kuhlman, Paul Ledoux, Brian Pinho, Robin Salo, and Jacob Skarek in NYI. You have Johnny Brodzinski and Ben Harper in the Rangers organization, Wade Allison with Philadelphia, Oscar Lindblom, Jacob Peterson, and Ryan Carpenter with the San Jose Sharks. And then Nicholas Abuki-Bell, Alex Limoges, Michael Scarbosa, Joey Snively, Dylan McElrath, and Hunter Shepard, all on waivers for Washington. So there's a ton of waivers on right now. If you look at the waiver updates, I'd be looking at a guy like Nicholas Abuki-Bell in Washington, a decent bomb six forward. I could not sign for an overly long period of time, cheaper, just over $1 million. I could definitely see a team pick him up. He was actually picked up on waivers last year too, so I could definitely see someone pick him up on waivers. Lindblom's a significant name in San Jose, but I don't think at a $2.5 million cap hit, someone will claim him. Wade Allison in Philadelphia is a decent name, a good young player, cheap contract, could definitely play bomb 6 minutes on like the third or fourth pair. I could definitely see him get some interest. Same thing with Robin Salo with the New York Islanders. He's a solid defensive prospect, looks to be a solid player in the future. I think there's a lot of teams who could look at a young guy like Salo as a possible option to try and claim. Maybe even Otto Koivula, who could be a good bottom six forward. You also have Gregory Denisenko in Florida, who was a former first-round pick. I think he could definitely fit into a team's middle six, in my opinion, so I could see Denisenko get a look. Bjork, who's a decent defenseman, as well as Carson Mayer, who's a decent forward for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I could see both of those guys get some looks, as well as Caleb Jones in Carolina. So there's definitely a handful of guys you could see get claimed today. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not exactly sure if we'll do an update on who got claimed in the next waiver batch later today, but if we do get around to it, I'll definitely let you guys know who was claimed and who is the next waiver batch for today. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like we got a lot more waiver news over the next couple of days as teams are going to be finalizing their roster over the next couple of days. So stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more waiver news, but for the time being, no one was claimed on Friday, and those are players being placed on waivers on Friday. At this point in time, we don't know who's going to be claimed and who's going on waivers later today, but we will try and get a new update video later today. Just an update here from the future. A couple of hours later, we've had the announcements about the waiver updates. As I said, I'll do a quick waiver update here after my video. And we do have a couple of waiver news. So first, of all those players that I just said went on waivers today, including a lot of names like a Caleb Jones, like a Nicholas Abuki-Bell, like a Ben Harper, a couple of other names that are out there. Most of them wound up clearing waivers, except for one player, and that was Gregory Denisenko. Now, I know we mentioned that the Vegas Golden Knights recently moved Brendan Brisson to the AHL. It was a little bit confusing about that. Well, the Vegas Golden Knights wound up clearing Gregory Denisenko. So the former first-round pick of the Florida Panthers is now going to be joining the Vegas Golden Knights. A solid middle six forward, I think, in my opinion. If he's playing with guys like Marchessault, Carlson, Barbashev, Stevenson, and that middle six, I think Denisenko could thrive in Vegas. So this is a fantastic waiver claim, in my opinion, for the Vegas Golden Knights. But it's the only waiver claim. Everyone else who was on waivers cleared yesterday, so no other waiver news update there. We do have a handful of players being placed off of waivers today. For the Boston Bruins, you have Jacob Zaboral, you have Jesper Boqvist and Oscar Steen. For the Buffalo Sabres, you have Brendan Bureau, Kale Clegg, and Riley Stillman. The Jackets have Trey Fix-Wolansky on waivers. The Avalanche have Jacka Khan, Brad Hunt on waivers today. The Edmonton Oilers have Cam Dineen, Philip Kemp, Brad Malone and Calvin Pickard on waivers today. The LA Kings have placed young prospect Tyler Madden on waivers today. The New Jersey Devils have Shane Bowers, as well as Justin Dowling and Tice Thompson and Max Willman on waivers. The Nashville Predators have Denis Gurianov on waivers, as well as Jonas Klondalik. And the Seattle Kraken have Chris Drieger, Cale Fleury, and John Hayden on waivers. So with Drieger going down, that must mean that Joey Decords won the backup role in Seattle. I think he'll be a fantastic backup. I don't expect anyone to claim Drieger with him having a $3.6 million cap hit, but definitely a decent, interesting name on waivers. I look for guys like Cale Fleury, who's only making about $800,000. He's a guy who I'd looked at to be possibly claimed. I also look at Denis Gurianov, a solid middle six forward who can definitely work out with some teams. Tyler Mann's a decent prospect. If there's a team out there who thinks he can be a good fourth, third line center this year, I think he could be a guy who's looked at. Jacob Zaboral, decent 6th, 7th defenseman. I could see him be a guy who's claimed off of waivers. Brandon Biro had a fantastic preseason in Buffalo. I could see him be a guy who's claimed off of waivers. Boquist in Boston, Clegg in Buffalo, I think are a couple of other guys who could get a look. So there's a couple of decent young players here who are on waivers who I think could get claimed. But those are waiver updates here. Just to recap, everyone from yesterday on Friday who was placed on waivers cleared except for Denisenko, who was taken by the Vegas Golden Knights. And those are quick updates here for who has been placed off of waivers. One more quick news note, the Seattle Kraken have sent down Shane Wright and Riker Evans on to the minors. Not overly surprised there. There was a lot of talk that those two guys could go to the minors. They'll probably continue to work in the minors, and if there's injuries or if they're doing overly well, I would expect them to be called up. But for a start of the season, looks like Wright and Evans will both start in the minors. That's your quick update here. Now I'll get you back to the video. But that's the waiver update. Going over to a couple of PTO updates now. There have been a handful more of PTO guys who have been released from their contracts. First, we forgot to mention one player we were looking at in our last video, and that was Austin Pogonski, who was let go by the Arizona Coyotes. Then 2 days ago, the Columbus Blue Jackets let go of Aaron Dell, the Carolina Hurricanes let go of Jaden Havljawicz's, and the Colorado Avalanche let go of Yoel Kiviranta. And then yesterday, Nick Shore, Kiefer Bellows, Zach Aston Reese, and Nathan Boileau in Carolina, Columbus with Stephen Matteo, and Detroit with Michael Hutchinson, all wound up getting released off of their PTO. So I'm not overly shocked for most of these guys. Pogonski was an AHL player. I was not surprised that he got cut by the Arizona Coyotes. I'm not overly shocked there. Dell was a decent third-string goaltender, but they do now have Spencer Martin, so if they have Martin, I'm not exactly sure they need another third-string goalie, so not overly shocked at this point in time after those moves that Dell is cut by the Jackets. Matteo, a decent AHL forward again. The Jackets already have a deep forward group, so not overly shocked that he was cut. The Red Wings have 3 stalled goalies in Lyon, Reimer, and Russo, so cutting Hutchinson I don't think is overly surprising, although I think he is going to the AHL to sign it there. The Avalanche, I am a little bit surprised that Kiviranta didn't get an NHL contract, at least with the Avalanche. I thought he could definitely get a contract, and he's a solid bomb 6 forward, but he doesn't get a contract. That's a little bit surprising in my opinion for the Avs. And then for the Canes, they cut all 5 players that they had on the PTO. Nick Shore, Nathan Boileau, Zach Aston Reese, Kiefer Bellows, and Jaden Havljawicz's. Now, at this point in time, Shore and Bellows were bomb 6 forward / AHL forward. I was not overly shocked they didn't get a contract. I think there was a possibility, but not overly shocked they didn't get a contract. Havljawicz's same sort of thing, AHL player. Not overly shocked that he didn't get a contract. Boileau and Aston Reese thought stood decent chances to get an NHL contract. Boileau with this Kane stacked defense, though, I thought there was an outside chance for him too, but I wasn't overly expecting it. Aston Reese is a solid bomb 6 forward, and I thought he could have fit in really well with the Canes, but he gets released too. So the 2 surprises I'm basically really surprised at was Aston Reese and Kiviranta. I thought those just stood good chances to get PTOs, but those 2 along with Havljawicz's, Shore, Bellows, Boileau, Del Matteo, and Hutchinson all wound up being released off of their PTOs. So I'm not overly shocked at that point that those guys were released off of their PTOs. And I'm sure that some of those guys will be getting a second opportunity. I think there's a chance there that Kiviranta and Aston Reese probably sign elsewhere. But at this point in time, all of those players have been released off their PTOs, and there's only a handful of guys left on their PTOs. So, going to be interesting to see who's able to stay and sign on a contract extension, and who's going to be able to be moving on. Quickly, with injury updates, not overly much since we last talked, but there have been a couple of injury updates, so I want to discuss some of this quickly. The Pittsburgh Penguins' Wavier Joseph has been cleared to play. The St. Louis Blues' Alexei Toropchenko has a lower body injury, is out day-to-day. Yanni Hakanpää has undisclosed injuries, out for an unknown period of time. Ryan Donato's cleared to play. Jason Pollin's cleared to play. Alec Martinez has an upper body injury and is out day-to-day. Damon Hunt was cleared to play. It's when he was sent to the minors. But Sam Hentages, Michael Milan, and Caden Bankier all have undisclosed injuries, out for an unknown period of time. So is Jared Spurgeon. He's been announced as week to week, so it sounds like they're going to start the season without Jared Spurgeon. Ryan Suzuki has upper body injuries, out for an unknown period of time. Sam Bennett has an undisclosed injury, out for an unknown period of time. Chase DeLeo has a knee injury. He had an MCL sprain. He's going to be out for the next 2 months. So that's really bad for him. Kyle McCarr has been cleared to play. Zach Whitecloud has had surgery. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. So the Knights are going to be starting shorthanded without Zach Whitecloud in the lineup. Buffalo has Eric Johnson, who's been cleared to play. Ville Heinola has an ankle injury. He's going to be out for the next 10 weeks. Really bad blow for the Jets' young defensive prospect, but he's going to be out for a long period of time. Carson Seuss has an undisclosed injury. He's out for an unknown period of time. It did not look good. He got injured in yesterday's preseason action. He could be out for a little while. Sam Bennett's lower body injury has been updated to day-to-day, and he may miss the start of the season. So it will be really bad blow for Florida if he misses the start of the season. And then Leo Carlson's lower body injury is out for an unknown period of time. So really bad blows there for some of these players. Some of these guys are out for an unknown period of time, so not sure if they'll miss the start of the season or not. Season's only a couple of days away now, so it's going to be interesting to see if these guys can get back into game action before the start of the season, or if they're going to miss the first few games. So going to be interesting to see, but at least for Heinola, Spurgeon, and Whitecloud, they're most likely going to miss the start of the season and the first few games. So really bad blows for those teams. So that's your roster updates, and we're going to quickly here discuss a couple of things that I want to watch out for going into the season. Now, there's a couple of days left before the rosters are finalized, and I do think there's a possibility that we could see a couple of trades. Now, here's some of the things I'd be looking out for. First, Toronto, Ottawa. I expect them to try and make at least one move depending on their injuries. There's a lot of talk that Connor Timmins might be injured for a long period of time. There's been some talk about John Klingberg being injured for a little bit. If those two are both out to start the season, especially if they're out on long-term injury reserve, they won't have to make any moves. But if they're both not needing to be placed on long-term injury reserve, then this team is going to need to make at least one, if not two moves. I think there's still a possibility to move Sam Lafferty on waivers. I know he's had a really good camp, but I could see them try and move him on waivers. I could still see him try and move Jarnkrok in a trade. So I think there's definitely a possibility that the Leafs make a move before the season starts. Same thing with Ottawa. Norris, there's still a lot of injury concerns there. If Norris needs to be placed on long-term injury reserve, I think they should be fine for the start of the season. But if Norris is healthy and ready to go, they're going to need to make a move to sign Pinto. I still think Joseph's the likely candidate. Maybe Brandstrom, but in my opinion, it's still most likely Joseph. He's a solid middle six winger. I could definitely see teams like Philly or San Jose take on his contract and sort of work with him over the next couple of years to be a solid middle six forward for their team. So I would definitely be looking out for those two teams to be interested in a guy like Mateo Joseph. And I do think if Norris is going to be healthy to start the season, Joseph is a very likely candidate to be moved. If you look at some other teams around the NHL, if Tampa can't acquire a goalie on waivers, I think there's a strong chance that they try and get a trade. Try and find a trade for a substitute goaltender who can play in exchange for Vasilevsky. It sounds like there's a lot of teams who will be really wary at this point in time to place their third-string goalie on waivers. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I do think there's a possibility that we could see the Bolts try and acquire someone. Same thing with the Canadiens. We could see them try and flip someone like a Kane Primo. I think there's a decent chance to try and move Primo. So we'll have to wait and see there. But I would definitely not be shocked if a guy like Kane Primo was on the move. Teams like Chicago, San Jose, and Anaheim could see take on some cap space if there's some teams out there who are not overly fond of a contract and they want to clear some cap space before the season starts. If at the right price, like I said with Joseph, I think there's a couple of players out there who I think could be moved. So I'm not overly shocked if some of these guys wind up getting moved. I would not be overly shocked if that happened. If you look at the Vancouver Canucks, I keep on hearing them possibly making one more move before the season starts. With the Tooth injury, if he's out longer term, I do think they could try and look to get a defenseman. We know they've had some interest in a guy like Cal Foote, who just cleared waivers. Maybe he's the guy who they go after. Maybe there's a couple of decent depth defensemen they could try and go after to sort of fill that hole on the third pair. So I think there's definitely a shot there that the Canucks try and add defenseman. It's going to be interesting to see, but I definitely think there's a shot there that the Canucks make another move. The Avs, I could see, still try and trade for a goalie. They don't have a solid backup behind Georgiev right now, so I could see them look to try and make a move. Another team would be the Blue Jackets. May move one of their defensemen. They still have a creative blue line. I think that's a possibility. So I think there's a couple of moves we could see before the start of the season. One big one I could see is Matt Grzelyck. After the fantastic play in training camp of Mason Lohrei, that has led to speculation that a guy like Matt Grzelyck could be dealt. If not in the next couple of days, then maybe in season. Matt Grzelyck's a solid third pair defenseman, but he also makes $3.6 million, so there could be some cap savings if the Bruins were to move him to possibly make another trade, possibly in season, to help their roster. So I think there's a possibility Grzelyck gets moved, maybe even in the next couple of days. I've heard the team with the Blackhawks be linked to him, but if Mason Lohrei looks really good and could even make the NHL team out of the training camp, I think there's a solid option that the Bruins possibly do move on from Matt Grzelyck. There's a lot of talk throughout the offseason that he could be moved. Maybe this is the sort of bump that the Bruins need to try and move him. So going to be interesting to see, but I could definitely see Matt Grzelyck be moved. If not right now, then sometime in season with the play of Mason Lohrei. And I think there's a solid chance that at some point in time, possibly even to Chicago, Matt Grzelyck could be moved. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I expect Matt Grzelyck to be moved at some point in time. And then keep your eyes out on teams like the Ottawa Senators, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Vancouver Canucks, especially if they're losing Carson Souce for a little bit, Columbus Blue Jackets, other teams there as well. Bolts who need a goaltender, Avs who need a goaltender. Definitely, there seems to be a lot of teams out there who are going to be making moves. I would not be overly shocked if over Sunday and Monday we saw 2 or 3 trades that helped a couple of teams. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I definitely do expect a couple of trades over the next couple of days, but maybe not a ton. So it's going to be interesting to see, but that's all I'm going to talk about here today. Remember to stay tuned. I'll probably do another video on Monday discussing all of the news updates, as well as I'll definitely be doing one discussing the finalized rosters, as well as my playoff predictions, how I view the teams in the playoffs, who do I see going to the playoffs, who do I see going to the Stanley Cup final. Definitely, if you want to know my full season preview predictions, don't forget to stay tuned for Monday, as I'll be doing my predictions on Monday. And definitely don't forget to stay tuned for my usual videos next Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So definitely, going to be interesting to see, but that's your news update for today. Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about the waiver claims, the PTO cuts, training camp cuts? Any surprises there? Do you think we could see a couple of trades before the season starts? Is it going to be Toronto? Is it going to be Ottawa? Does Boston move Grzelyck? Does Tampa or Colorado add a goaltender? Does the Canucks possibly add defensemen? Do the Jackets try and move the defensemen? Definitely. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to once again like this video and subscribe. We're close to 200 subscribers, and you guys have been so supportive. So please don't forget to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So definitely check that out. Leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.